The second to last time that I broke up with my ex-boyfriend, he crumpled to the floor in my living room and cried. "I can't go back on the dating apps," he told me. "I can't start over again." After nearly a year together, he had a lot to say about himself and not so much to say about us. We'd met on Tinder 10 months earlier, and the beginning had been a whirlwind. 5 years older, he was tall and handsome, creative and caring, and he made it clear he was looking for a serious relationship. He was in a band, but he had his shit together. He kissed me goodnight after the second date. We slept together on the third. He bought me nice dinners and paid me ample compliments. He thought I was stylish and quippy, and I liked the way it felt to be in our little world. He got me a really generous gift early in our courtship, which I thought was strange, but I was still into it. He bought me flowers to say sorry for the smallest infractions. It was too much, but his grand gestures made me feel special. It seemed like he wanted to prove he cared. We went on a road trip to Marfa, and we fell in love in West Texas, getting caught in the rain at a music festival, helping his cool friends film a cool music video, and falling asleep under the stars as we talked about big future things that I had never talked about with a boyfriend before. His ex-girlfriend had been crazy, and he was so grateful he found me. He was staying at my house a few months later around Christmas. We had just wrapped up this romantic evening by the fireplace, working on this little love journal thing I got us, when he had his first big tantrum. He cut his finger chopping vegetables for dinner, announced his guitar playing would never be the same, and then shut himself in my bedroom for hours without another word. His sudden shift from cozy to cold confounded me, and I started to wonder what I had done wrong. The panicky feelings swelling in my stomach would become a regular occurrence during the lows in our roller coaster relationship. My best friend warned me that I was in for a tough time. But we were making plans, and I wanted so badly for the best moments between us to outweigh the worst. With my rose-colored glasses planted firmly on my face, I was just never really able to see those red flags for what they were. So by the next summer, he was moving in with me. Except that he wasn't. After months of schlepping back and forth between our houses on opposite ends of the city for nearly every night, we had been counting down the days until we would live in one place. I had kicked my roommate out for him. He'd sold his house. Everything was ready to go. And yet, he had moved next to nothing from his place to mine. He had nothing to say about the master bathroom renovation or even the layout of his future music room. I had never lived with a partner before, and I had dreamed about finally having the right person to cuddle, co-work, collaborate, and cook with, waking up next to me every day. I had hoped we'd be making these big decisions together, designing the life that we wanted in our home. But now, we were hardly having sex, and we were not about to paint the walls in matching overalls the way I had imagined, the way I'd wanted. Then late on the eve of my childhood friend's bachelorette getaway, he turned to me after some of the most vacant intercourse and revealed he had to tell me the darkest thing. He couldn't live with himself, or apparently me, if he didn't get this off his chest. He'd had HPV in his late 20s, and now he thought it might be back. I didn't understand why he'd never told me, why he was telling me now, moments after unprotected sex the night before my early flight, or even what the ramifications were. And his dramatic delivery was no comfort. Panic rising, I felt myself hover above the scene as the man I loved went on this self-effacing rant, ranging from sobbing apologies to declaring he should be locked up and I should get all his belongings. In the following weeks, I zombied through the rowdy bachelorette extravaganza in P-Town on Cape Cod, doing my best impression of a woo girl. Woo! Back in Austin at the OBGYN, the cervical biopsy forceps, essentially these long steel scissors, were too dull. So they had to do my cervical biopsy twice while I screamed expletives. I heard the nurse confirm precancer, so I told friends and family I was just waiting to hear how bad it was. Then the lab temporarily lost my HPV test. The week of waiting felt like an eternity, and I was in it alone. When I finally got the message from my doctor, it unexpectedly said, in all caps, "This is great! No precancerous cells!" Okay, so no cancer. But I couldn't stop crying. I tried to make us work. I still loved him. But the feeling in the pit of my stomach became a constant, and I couldn't stop shaking. I wasn't eating. He was telling me his life wasn't worth it. I wanted him to be okay, but hurting me like that and then looking for my comfort was too much for me. So I told his friends to handle him. I couldn't bear the weight of my pain and his shame too. So that's when I ended it there on the living room floor. And you know, he had just clogged the toilet in my guest bathroom. Looking back, I wish I had seen the literal shit that he left behind as the perfect stinky metaphor that it was. But instead, I just went out and I bought a plunger. And when we met up in person to exchange our stuff a few weeks later, I was exhausted from missing him and all the parts of me that felt missing too. I had been waking up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats like clockwork, reaching for him. I hadn't been making my bed, and I had been weeping into frozen burritos for dinner. But when I got to the condo he was now renting just a neighborhood south of mine, it appeared he had bounced back like a rubber ball. His place was pristine, his fridge was stocked with these meal prep kits he used to make for me, his pantry stocked with our favorite snacks. He looked good, and he had this incense burning that reminded me of easy nights back at his house. He'd make me breakfast in those mornings, and we'd talk about forever. Now, we were meeting under the pretense of closure, but at this point, I would have done anything to get halfway back to the normalcy so blatantly on display around me. He felt like home, and he looked like a lifeline. We both admitted we'd gone on a couple first dates since we split, but we missed each other. Maybe we could just sit for a spell and talk or not talk about anything other than the irreparable break between us. There was this hair elastic and a toothbrush at his place whose explanations didn't quite add up. But I put on those rose-colored glasses one last time, and I took him back. I was so tired. Not long after, he would call to confess, rather coolly, that he had fucked up again. He'd slept with his work mentee in our time apart, and then lied to my face about it. The last time that I broke up with my ex-boyfriend, I felt like he was begging me to end it. With clear eyes, I could finally see that the kind of love I was really longing for wasn't on the line. I told him flatly to go fuck himself, and I hung up. Years later, the panic in my stomach has subsided, and if I ever feel it bubble up like that again one day, I finally know when to put the phone down and walk away.